Hey guys, Coach here. Hey, thanks for joining me for a few minutes. I appreciate your time as always. I hope you get something from this, something that I was taught many, many years ago by a very good college professor and, as you know, my mentor, J.C. Burns. Hey, does this sound familiar to any of you? Hey, my yard looks pretty good for about 2 weeks or a month, and then, it's just kind of nothing else happens and nothing blooms. That's what we're talking about here today. We're going to think out your landscape from the eye of a landscape designer so that you have color from the very early months of spring all the way to the first frost. I'm glad you're here. Let's get going. Hey guys, Coach here. Don't forget the consultation services that we have at youryardcoach.com. Hey, welcome back. Hey, you ever notice how some landscapes always seem to have something blooming or a lot of somethings blooming, while others, look fantastic for a couple weeks or a month, and then they just kind of like, green, sort of green. A classic example up where I live is when thaw happens and spring kind of emerges, it always harkens me to the forsythia hedge. And man, for those couple of 3 weeks, man, that's just a showstopper. Bright golden yellow for as long as the hedge is, and then just shuts off, and it's just a green shrub the rest of the year. And for some people, that's okay. But what I'm reaching out to today is those people who would love to have that forsythia hedge and then have a continuous color producing landscape from forsythia all the way past Halloween and beyond. Now, let's make something really crystal clear here, and that is growing seasons are different for everybody. For zone 4 where I'm at, we got about 5 months. For zone 10, you guys basically have 12 months. In one form or another, you have 12 months. And I have designed in zone 9 where they got color 12 months out of the year. And I'll tell you how I did it. All right, so the biggest mistake that I see DIY homeowners make is they are, number one, they're color hounds and they're impulse buyers. They go to the nursery or they go to the box store, garden center area, and everything is on impulse. What is the pretty? What is the pretty of the day, basically? And if you've ever noticed, especially having come from the nursery world myself, when you walk into the nursery, you should be walking into an absolute plethora of color. Everything that is on display, in bloom, ready to go, ready for you to put your little spring grubby hands on. But if you look at it, most of the time that stuff is very short-lived bulbs or annuals that are going to come and go in about 30 to 60 days. When it comes to bulbs, even less. So what a lot of people face is that they get into this cyclical trap where they go to the store. Let's use zone 9 as an example, okay? You go to the store in late February or Marchish. Things are starting to warm up. Nurseries are starting to get a lot of inventory if they haven't got it already, and bursting with color everywhere. And everybody gets all excited. They got the spring fever. They want to dress up their drab winter yard for the year. And the problem is they rush to the petunias, they rush to the marigolds, they rush to the alyssum, they rush to the lobelia. And they go, oh, this is going to look so good. And they get home and through their toils and sweats, they plant up their color bed or their color bowls or their color baskets. And everything goes boom for about 8 weeks or so, especially with alyssum, lobelia. Those things tend to go wow factor for a very short period of time. And at the time of purchase, you're very, very happy. You got what you wanted. You have that little itch that has been scratched. That explosion of color for a few weeks satisfies you until they kind of go, I'm tired and I'm going to go to sleep now. And they just kind of fade away. Then you're left with whatever else you have, very long periods of green afterwards. And for most people, they kind of walk away with going, I just don't know what to do with it. You know, and they have this feeling like the landscape just kind of leaves them kind of flat. And they shake their head, dust off their hands, and move on with other spring, summer, and fall projects. So I have an adage that I'd like to share with you, and that is this. Buying plants in bloom is like building a baseball team entirely of pitchers. They may all be great players, for sure. They may all be great players, but they don't perform all the different jobs. As we know, MLB pitchers aren't the best hitters. We know that MLB pitchers are not the greatest right fielders or shortstop or catcher. And this is where I want you to change your way of thinking and do a little bit of research and have fun doing it. We don't all want to buy just the one plant and hope that it's going to do everything that you want it to do. So what exactly is a color continuum? It's a thought process put into your garden and landscape through research and involving many, many different kinds of plants, some of which you have, some of which you need to have. And it's not annuals all the time. Quite frankly, it's a lot more shrubby, grassy, trees, and perennials than it is annuals. Annuals are fillers. That is it. Fillers. And although they do a great job and they can be used initially in your color continuum, you have to think about the annuals themselves. Some, they get their legs in springtime. Some get their legs in midsummer. Some, like annual vinca, they don't get off and running until mid to late summer. Then they finally get going because they need a very warm soil and garden bed soil area to really start to burst forth. You plant annual vinca in a cool part of the spring, it will sit there and just laugh at you for weeks, if not months. And then all of a sudden, boom, June, July, and August, it suddenly comes alive. And by September, holy moly, does that thing look great. So consider that when you're planning out your next landscape project. And that is that annuals are fillers and all the other plants are the star of the show. What we're trying to achieve is kind of this. As one plant finishes doing its blooming, forsythia comes in, forsythia comes out. Then another one begins, and another, and another. And I don't want to say singular plant. Many plants can hand off to the next one. You can have forsythia, then you could have crabapple blooms, you could have bulbs, you can have daffodil and tulips coming up. Then you put in some of your annual fillers in and around your bulb bed, and as soon as the bulbs start to go, boom, your violas and pansies and primrose and everything else are just all there, ready to go. It's basically like one plant or a set of plants is handing the baton to the next plant performer. It really is. Here you go. I've done mine, now you do you. So a way to break this down if you're not from the designer world, and that is literally take out a tablet, take out your electronic device, whatever you like to write on. For me, I'm still a pen and paper guy, but you want to break it down into early spring, early summer, late spring, midsummer, early fall, late summer, fall, winter, and start listing vertically from these times by doing some research when certain things bloom and how they perform and when they perform for your area. Okay, I'm in northern Maine and I can't think like Central Valley of California anymore. I can't think like Winter Haven, Florida, or San Diego, California, or Phoenix, Arizona. I can't think that way. I have to think about, okay, when is the snow gone? When is the ground thawed? And when can I actually get something in the ground that's going to respond? Because many times, even though the ground is thawed, it still might be 40-degree dirt and there's not too much that's going to take off and do anything just yet. For me, I seriously can't get excited about gardening anymore until June. But I can sure as heck plan. And I think we have a little bit of a rope around that monster right now. We have things that are working, things that have come up, things that hand off, and it's doing okay. It's got a color continuum going. Do I have any annuals? Yes, I have about 9 wave petunias and a couple calibrachoa outside. That's it. Everything else is bulbs, foliage, blooming shrubbery, trees, etc. That's my color continuum. So let's talk about 4 seasons of color for those of you who have the ability to celebrate with color through all 4 seasons. Now, I can celebrate 4 seasons up here, but it's a little different. I do it with red twig dogwood. I do it with evergreens that are not buried in snow, like my Alberta spruce and other stuff that we use for Christmas and that kind of thing. That's my color continuum. It's basically dominated by white everywhere and green, with the exceptions of the red twig dogwood, and that's about it. Now, for you guys in much higher zones, you can celebrate with various things. One of the things that comes to mind is the Sangukaku Japanese maple, the red-barked Japanese maple. Whew, man, I miss that one. It will not survive up here, or I would have one. And how brightly red those things would get in the wintertime after they lost their leaves. And in late October, November, when the fall color used to come onto those things and you had those cooler mornings, the low 40s, high 30 mornings, and that bark would start to redden up and the gold foliage, wow. Talk about continuous color. You know, you can't think bloom all the time. You have to think along the lines of texture, shape, leaf, season, etc., to bring this thing all together. Now, when we talk about various seasons and what you might find out there, it's going to be very zone specific. You can basically figure on January in San Diego and Corpus Christi, Texas, and Miami, Florida, and just move north. There's your seasons all the way through. Those places I just mentioned, 12 months out of the year. You can do lots of perennial and camellia-like and loropetalum-like and annual-like color, just enliven your whole landscape all year round. Now, as you move further north, those things progress further in the calendar. You're going to have much more spring-like weather in March by the time you hit the Midwest, NorCal area, Pennsylvania area. Those things we're talking about early April, or so. Every year is a little different, but I'm just spitballing it here. Every year might be a little different. But for us up here in the north, think about some of these things. and they are bulbs related. We talked about daffodils and tulips. I have really fallen in love with creeping phlox. I have some phlox subulata, and I call it moss phlox up here. But OMG, you want to talk about a splash of color in and around things that are just getting their legs going. Some of the daylilies are pushing up. The variegated hostas are coming to life. Liatris is pushing through the ground. Some of the salvia is starting to work. But the creeping phlox, for me, steals the show. And I will probably end up dividing some of these and trying to propagate them in other parts of the yard because they do an excellent job. And you want to talk about something that really looks kind of delicate, and yet it was under 8 feet of piled snow. And I had to go out there and kind of fluff them up a little bit because I for sure thought, oh no, these things are a goner. Nope. Came back to life. Beautiful for us spring, which means late May to late June. You know, that's our spring right about there. And they have been absolute just landscape warriors as far as production. Other things you can look at are like Dicentra, Bleeding Heart, your crabapple trees coming in, regular fruit trees blooming, you know, peaches and apples. This is all color and all impact on the landscape itself. You know, if you think about it, landscaping for spring, it's kind of easy. It really is. You know, you go to the nursery, you see all the pretties, you buy the pretties, you put them in. That's easy. What you have to worry about is after the spring. What can carry you through the late spring and summer months into the fall? That's where the thinking cap has to go on, and that's where you have to do a little bit of thinking for yourself and look at some of those things that work during that time of year. You're not going to find hydrangeas blooming in March. Not where I'm at. Probably not where you're at. But hydrangeas come July and August and early September, and even late September for me, you know, yes, then you have a nice color array that you can look to later on down the year. Let's think about early summer. And you can think about, for our mid growing zone ranges, let's just say 5 through 8, we can think about things like peonies and nepeta, catmint stuff, salvia, alliums, iris, gladiolas. All of these things will be coming up and starting to produce. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road, and men and women are separated from girls and boys in the gardening world. It's right about that early to midsummer range where all the springies are starting to fade. They're not doing what they were doing earlier. And then you get into midsummer and you see a pattern developing here. There's not a lot of annuals that I'm speaking about. I'm speaking now, midsummer, we're talking about daylilies and coneflower, coreopsis, heliopsis, Shasta daisy. These are the summer showstoppers that people who have thought it out really become successful. And the successful ones you always see stand out in the neighborhood. And some of these perennials, coupled with some annuals that are still performing, and maybe some of the shrubbery that's out there, maybe some of the summertime bulbs. I've got Asiatic and tiger lilies that are up and I can see buds on them, but they're not going to be here until next month. And they're going to be, I planted some down around my spirea and they're going to perform next year, but those are really going to wrench somebody's neck to see them. I mean, they're going to look special. So now what do we do when we get into the midsummer range and now we tilt off? Kids are going back to school and we're getting off into the mid to late summer and early fall weeks and months. Now is when other things need to come on board that are later in the year star performers. And you can think about much of the sedums that are out there. I have Autumn Joy and Night Ember sedum that I have Asters are a big perennial bloomer in the late summer. Some of your black-eyed Susan and hydrangeas that I mentioned. And then how about some of the ornamental grasses? There are a lot of variegated ornamental grasses out there that look really neat in the summer sunlight and early mornings, especially once they get their seed heads on. You want to talk about some special looking stuff. Now, I caution you on randomly selecting ornamental grasses. You have to be very selective because ornamental grasses can sometimes get a little invasive. Stay away from Mexican featherweed grass, not a fan. And enjoy the foliage and the texture differences between that and some of your other bloomers. And maybe don't let the grass go to seed all the way. Enjoy it in its prime and then get rid of the seed heads, unless you want them in other places. This is the time of year where most landscapes are really kind of weak. They seem like they're kind of tired. They've been trying to pump hard for you all the way since spring. And many of the perennials and annuals are just like, yeah, I'm done. Deadheading, maybe a second planting comes to mind. And yet, this is generally, depending on where you live, generally when people are outside enjoying their landscapes more than any other time of the year. Labor Day weekends, the beginning of football season, people are over at the house. You come on over for the brunches and the lunches, and people are in the backyard until the game starts. Playoffs for the baseball, you got family and friends over, and it's nice to have something that still looks really presentable and not anemic and tired. And one thing I really want to call your attention to, and that is, I mentioned it earlier, but I really want to drive that nail home. And that is, color doesn't always mean bloom. It can mean everything from colored foliage, variegation, anything that contrasts with one in front of the other. I'm such a fan of contrast, especially in the green prison in which I live. I very much enjoy the forest that surrounds our property, but it is monochromatic. It really is. Various shades of green and nothing more, except for some of the bark on some of the birch trees. That's it. So I have gone to great lengths to bring in things like ninebark and heuchera and variegated hostas and the sedum that I mentioned, variegated weigela and variegated arbor, the fire chief arborvitaes, and the most recent editions of the yellow ribbon arborvitae. All of these bring color to life. If I had, and you'll see it in the video later in the week, but if you saw what the candy corn spirea and the Big Bang spirea look like out around the two boulders, I mean, it's color in itself. It really is, and it's a showstopper. Other things that you can use, especially later in the seasons, we talked about grasses, but how about various ferns as well? And I'm a big fan of hosta. They are some workhorses. And in July and into early August, you get a lot of color off of them, not from just the variegated leaf, but from the bloom as well. And then as we fade off into September, into October, or later, depending on where you're at, you have a brief window of time where, say like the annual vinca, and you have the last remnants of the perennials that did the mid to late summer runs. You have some color leftovers there. And now is a good time during that seasonal change where we kind of, 90% of us tuck the landscape in for the year and we turn to winter preparation. That's where your fall colors of your trees and your shrubs can really come to the front part of the stage. And here I have birch trees and spirea and the ninebark play double duty. They really do. I don't have any big deciduous trees. I will have apple and peach, and they provide some fall color, but that's not really their intent. And then you have some late season perennials. The asters will carry you all the way into the fall months. You will have some natives, but honestly, I kind of stay away from some of the natives because I've seen what they do, and they tend to spread really bad, but they are very conducive to growing with very little or no maintenance here whatsoever. So as a landscape designer, a professional landscape designer, I don't rely entirely on flowers if you haven't picked up on that yet. Flowers are the icing to all the color cake that we have in the landscape. This structure, this thought out plan really carries the landscape from one season to another. And by understanding that and maybe going out and looking at your landscape, and you can just look and point. When does that bloom? If it blooms. If you have lots of evergreens, well, you don't have a lot of bloom. And if you have some shrubbery, maybe you have some bloom on them for a couple, 3 weeks out of the year, and then that's it. So now's the time to think, all right, if that tree comes in April, then I need something for March, and then I need something, one or two things for the beginning of May, and then the end of May and into June, and you can see how this goes. You really have to think it out. And then you have to think about, well, what could complement themselves as one comes in and one starts to go out, and the color contrasts of warm colors versus cool colors. And then you can start mixing. You can have, a mixture of midsummer flowers that have purples backed up by yellows and oranges, and you have a very, very, how should I say, depth of color. Not just a single color, but you have color that spreads out, contrasts throughout the whole garden. Another thing that will really give your landscape a tremendous impact, and that is, don't think about onesies and twosies, especially when it comes to shrubbery and perennials. If you can, and you have the space, think drifts of or mass plantings of various color producing annuals and perennials, shrubs and trees. Not just onesie twosies. Those are nice to look at, but they're not the awe factor that you're going to try to seek out when it comes to impact during those various seasons. You want something of a huge drift of maybe drift roses that come in during the summer months. And it's just not 3 over in the corner, but maybe it's a serpentine swath of them that go along the whole back of your back fence. And then behind them, you have something else, preferably contrasting, that look really good and show those roses off. And then in front of those roses, you have a whole drift of dwarf salvia of some kind. They have a total contrasting color. And when that bed comes in and you walk out onto your patio or deck, it is a showstopper, but not onesie twosies. Onesie twosies are okay for a color basket next to your lounge chair. But when you get out into the land itself, think big, think bigger, and have drift and mass planting for the ultimate impact. So down and dirty, here's a real landscape example for a very small front or backyard. Just an example layout that you might want to think about, okay? And I'm not going to pick a zone because everybody has a spring or a summer somewhere. So think about just these plants when you're getting going. In spring, think about your bulbs. Think about your spring bulbs. And as you do those bulbs, you're going to be planting some viola or pansy or primrose or primula or something else in there at the same time. And that'll get you from the early spring and turn the corner to where you can get into early summer stuff. Then when you get there, you can think about some of your peonies colors, your salvia colors, coupled with coreopsis that are coming in right about then. Remember, one handing off to the other. Then your echinacea comes in, your coneflower. Late summer, always consider the sedums and the asters. And then your structure, the structure of your shrubs and trees carry the whole thing together. So you have other perennials like heuchera. That heuchera is mainly a foliage color, not so much a blooming color. And then you have structural evergreens, some of the juniper, some of the maples, some of the globe arborvitaes. All those things play a part. But there you go from spring to late summer, fall. If you just have a dinky yard, plant them in mass, and there's your color continuum in a dinky yard right there. Boom, you're done. So let's wrap this up. Let's go over at least the 5 common mistakes that homeowners make, and you can avoid and start thinking like a landscape designer. Remember when you first go to the nursery in the springtime, you're buying only what's blooming today. We're going to stop that today. You can have some, but you want to look down the road and you want to go to that nursery with a list of the things that you want to find so that as you invest in your landscape, you're planting for today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next season. That's how you're going to buy your plant material. Number 2, ignoring fall interest. A lot of people think about fall as leaves on trees, and yes, that is it. But there's a lot of other fall interest out there that will still have bloom, still have foliage, still have bark color, and fall is an amazing month. It is the second spring of the year, so don't discount it. Number 3 is you get off into a lot of dozens and dozens of different plant varieties. And although it's nice to experiment, the onesie-twosie landscapes are kind of confusing. And what I'd rather you think about is maybe a dozen different plant varieties throughout the front and backyard. And there are the mass plantings that I explained earlier. Mass plantings in drifts that come in and then hand off to the drift behind it, then hands off to the drift next to it. That's where we're going. Don't forget your evergreen structures, your shrubbery and your trees. It's nice to have the color, but the color is complemented by the bread and butter and bones of a landscape. It really is. And if you're going and shopping, you've done your homework and everything, and you found a Sasanqua camellia that you just can't live without. If you can afford it, don't buy a Sasanqua camellia. You know, you saw that Jean May Sasanqua camellia there, and you fell in love with the pink floral impact that it gave you. If you can afford it, get 7 of them and plant 7 in a drift. Instead of the one of one variety, find the one that you really like and find room for 5 of them, 7 of them, 11 of them, whatever it takes. Then you have impact. If you think like a designer, your landscape will reflect that. So I want you to build a color continuum with a little bit of due diligence and research where one plant hands a spotlight off to the next. And you'll enjoy months and months of color instead of just a few weeks. So here's the question of the day for you. What month does your landscape look its best right now? Is there a particular month? Might it be March, April, May, June, July, August? When does it look the best? And how long does it last? And what is your ultimate goal as far as how you want the landscape to look? I'd love to hear an email or on the video. Make sure you watch the video and drop a comment. Here's a little come to Jesus moment. If you're struggling with that kind of stuff and it's just not your niche, I am here to coach you through it. Check out the website, youryardcoach.com, where you can find some step-by-step stuff on how to do the landscaping. There's some designing services there. There is some consulting services there. And I would love to help you out just so that you can get over that hump. It doesn't mean that, I need to hold your hand through everything. I just need to get you to that aha moment where you understand and then you take the ball and run with it from there. Hey, that's what I have for you guys today. I hope that this really, hit a chord with some of you and that you think beyond the consumer seeing a marigold. You think about going much deeper and much further into your landscape so that you have something to look at and enjoy from as early month as possible all the way to the time where ground freezes or the heavens open up or it's just yucky outside and not a lot of things are going to thrive. As always, to your landscape success, I hope you enjoyed this one. Stay tuned for the video and I will see you next week. Bye for now.